The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs and shifting feet, the stale air holding the quiet tension of a room waiting for something strange to unfold. The morning docket had started late, and no one expected anything unusual, until the bailiff read the next name aloud. Defendant, unknown black female, refuses to identify. The defendant was led in, wearing the unmistakable orange jumpsuit of the county jail. Her wrists were bound tightly in silver cuffs, her posture upright despite what she had endured. The two arresting officers, Radin and Holt, stood near the rear of the room, arms crossed and amused expressions on their faces. They had laughed about this all morning. Laughed about how she kept insisting she was a damn congresswoman. She didn't even have a driver's license on her, Radin whispered to Holt. What kind of congresswoman walks around without ID? He shook his head. Probably high off something. Wait, till the judge hears that story. Judge Clarkson adjusted his glasses and tapped his gavel. The courtroom quieted as the woman stepped forward with small, controlled steps, the chains on her ankles clinking softly. She didn't look like the broken or crazy type. In fact, her gaze was steady, level, and her face held a kind of quiet defiance. She had high cheekbones, short natural hair pulled back, and eyes that didn't flinch even under fluorescent lights and sneering stares. State your name for the record, the judge said, with a tone already tinged with skepticism. The woman looked at him, calmly. Congresswoman Elena Morrison, representing Maryland's 5th Congressional District. Someone snorted. A young assistant prosecutor buried her face behind her legal pad. The bailiff hesitated slightly, unsure whether he should laugh too or hold the line. Even Judge Clarkson couldn't hide his doubt. Excuse me, ma'am, are you currently under psychiatric care? No, she said. And I'd appreciate it if we could begin treating this as a legitimate hearing instead of a comedy show. Radin nudged Holt. She's got the attitude of a real politician, I'll give her that, he muttered. Holt chuckled, then coughed into his sleeve to cover it. The public defender assigned to the case, a young man named Ellis Grant, stood and adjusted his tie, clearly trying to manage his nerves. Your Honor, if I may, my client was not carrying identification at the time of her arrest, but she did verbally identify herself multiple times. We have reason to believe her claim is true. Judge Clarkson raised an eyebrow. That she is a sitting member of Congress, Mr. Grant. Are you seriously suggesting that this woman, dressed in a jail uniform, with no ID, and brought in on trespassing charges, is a federal lawmaker? Ellis nodded. Yes, Your Honor. And how would that even be possible? Members of Congress don't just walk the streets of this city at night without security or staff. She owns the property where she was arrested, Ellis replied. She was returning home after a flight from D.C. According to her, the key stuck in the lock and she sat on the steps while waiting for her assistant to bring a spare. The officers saw her, approached aggressively, and arrested her after she explained who she was. Clarkson rubbed the bridge of his nose, unconvinced. And she didn't produce identification. She tried. The moment she reached into her bag, the officers tackled her. I see, the judge said slowly. Very dramatic. Elena Morrison remained still. She didn't speak unless directly addressed. She had already endured the pain of humiliation, of disbelief, of being told she was nobody when her entire life had been spent proving the opposite. She wasn't about to perform for them now. Not again. Judge Clarkson motioned to the evidence table. Let's see this bag she allegedly reached for. The bailiff brought it forward, a simple black leather handbag, slightly scuffed from the arrest. The judge opened it cautiously, sifting through its contents. His hands stopped when he pulled out a hard plastic card. He adjusted his glasses again and read it. There was a long pause. Congressional ID, he murmured. Issued to Elena N. Morrison, Maryland District 5. Radin straightened in the back of the room, color draining from his face. Holt looked toward the exit like it might save him. Clarkson kept digging. A House of Representatives security badge. An embossed envelope containing a formal invitation to a White House dinner. Several business cards. A leather-bound planner stamped with the Capitol dome in gold. The judge looked up, speechless for the first time that morning. This appears authentic. It is, Elena said firmly. I'll need to verify this with your staff, Clarkson said, still struggling to process the shift in the room. If you're telling the truth, why didn't the officers verify your identity at the time of arrest? Raiden blurted out. She didn't give us a straight answer. You mean she said who she was and you didn't believe her? Elena corrected, her voice suddenly sharp. I told you my name. My position. I told you my address and explained what was happening. You laughed at me. You threw me to the ground. You told me to stop playing pretend. I didn't see a badge, Holt mumbled. You didn't look. She turned back to the judge. They weren't interested in the truth. They were interested in control. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to choke on. The prosecutor didn't speak. The clerks were typing furiously. A reporter in the corner slid discreetly out the door, already dialing their editor. Judge Clarkson's gavel came down with a louder bang this time. This court is now in recess until identity can be confirmed by official congressional staff. Bailiff, escort the defendant to the holding room. She is not to be placed back in a cell. Ellis stepped forward. Your Honor, I request her immediate release on recognizance. The risk of flight is non-existent, and Clarkson cut him off. Mr. Grant, if this is indeed a sitting Congresswoman, she will be released and formally apologized to by this court. But until then, protocol must be observed. As Elena was led out through the side door, she passed by the officers who had arrested her. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The look in her eyes said everything. Raiden looked down at the floor. Holt wouldn't meet her gaze. 15 minutes later, the courtroom doors burst open again. A man in a navy blue suit, holding a leather folder, marched in and handed a document to the clerk. He was flanked by two staffers in formal business attire. I'm Martin Wells, he announced. Chief Legal Advisor to Congresswoman Elena Morrison. I demand to speak with Judge Clarkson immediately. In the holding room, Elena was offered water and an apology by a quiet bailiff who had clearly read the headlines before his shift. She didn't respond. She simply stared at the gray walls and let her mind drift, back to the House chamber, to committee meetings, to the legislation she had introduced just last month, a bill to restrict racial profiling by law enforcement. She remembered the opposition, the smirks from senior congressmen, the subtle suggestions that she was exaggerating the problem, that things weren't that bad anymore. She had stood on the House floor and said, it's not about if it will happen. It's about when. Because one day, I won't be recognized in a suit behind a podium. I'll be seen as just another black face in a hoodie on the street. And now, that day had come. A knock came at the door. It opened slowly. Judge Clarkson entered, followed by her attorney, Martin, and her assistant, Leah, who was holding Elena's congressional credentials in a leather folder. He looked ashamed. Congresswoman Morrison, he said quietly. I offer my sincerest apology on behalf of this court. She rose from her chair, towering in dignity despite everything they had tried to take from her. She didn't shout, didn't scold. She simply said, I accept your apology, Judge. But I won't be the only one needing one. Outside the courthouse, the world was already watching. Reporters lined the sidewalk. Cameras flashed. Supporters cheered as the truth spread like wildfire through social media, through news channels, through every corner of a nation still grappling with what justice really meant. Elena Morrison emerged, not as a broken defendant, but as a blazing reminder that power does not always wear a suit, and justice often walks the street in silence until it's forced to speak. And now, it had spoken. Of course. Here is part 2 expanded into approximately 2,000 words, continuing the powerful, immersive narrative from part 1, all without any headings or breaks. The street was quiet when she stepped out of the car. It was a warm evening, the kind where the pavement still radiated heat from the day, where cicadas buzzed softly in the background and distant sirens moaned like ghosts. Elena Morrison paused at the edge of the sidewalk, her heels clicking once against the curb before she stepped up and took in the familiar sight of her late aunt's brownstone. The porch light was out. One of the bulbs probably burned out again. She'd reminded herself a dozen times to call the property manager. Now she stood under the street lamp, which cast a slanted gold light on the steps where generations of her family had gathered, Her aunt sipping coffee in the mornings, her cousin braiding hair in the sun, her mother watching the world go by with a paper in hand and slippers on her feet. It had been a long week in D.C. The kind of week that stripped your soul. Elena had argued on the House floor, been ambushed on cable news, watched a watered-down version of her police accountability bill get blocked in committee, and received threats laced with the usual bile. Some were creative, some were cruel, a few were so personal they made her stomach twist. But she had smiled through all of it. Here, back in this neighborhood, she thought she could breathe again. She pulled a key from her purse, walked up the first 2 steps, and bent to slide it into the old brass lock. It jammed. Not unexpected, this door always did that in the summer humidity. She jiggled it gently, the metal refusing to give. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face, and she stepped back, sitting down on the second step, pulling out her phone. The text to Leah was short, "Spare key please." Main lock jammed again, 12th Street brownstone. She added a sighing emoji and sent it. She pulled off her heels, flexing her toes, leaned her head back, and closed her eyes for a moment. She wasn't dressed like a congresswoman. She hadn't planned to be. Jeans, a long dark green tunic, a brown leather crossbody bag, hair tied back, not styled. No makeup, no badge, just Elena. Somewhere down the street, a car engine idled. She ignored it. Another set of headlights passed, then disappeared. A few minutes later, the sound returned, louder this time, and then the beam of headlights washed over her like a spotlight. She opened her eyes slowly. The cruiser rolled to a stop in front of the house. She watched the 2 doors swing open. 2 officers, white, youngish, stepped out. Their hands didn't go to their weapons, but their body language stiffened the moment they saw her sitting on the stoop. "Ma'am," one said sharply, "can we help you?" She blinked, surprised. "No, thank you. I'm good." "What are you doing here?" the other asked. "I live here." They exchanged glances. "This house?" "Yes." "Do you have ID?" She reached for her bag without hesitation. "Sure, it's right here." "Don't move," the first officer shouted. She froze, her hand halfway inside her purse. "Hands where we can see them." The second barked. She slowly raised her hands, setting the bag down beside her. Okay. Look, I'm not resisting. I just reached for my ID like you asked." "What's your name?" the first officer asked. "Elena Morrison." "Spell it." She did. "Do you have any proof you live here?" "It's my family's property. I'm back from D.C. for a weekend." "D.C. I'm a congresswoman," she said plainly. "I just got in from a late flight. The keys stuck. I texted my assistant to bring the spare. Should be here soon." The pause that followed was the first drop before the downpour. Both men blinked, then burst into simultaneous laughter. "A congresswoman," the shorter one said. "You serious right now?" She didn't respond. "Where's your security detail then?" the tall one asked, chuckling. "I don't always use them. I'm on private time." "Right. And I'm the mayor of New York," the other officer said, walking closer. "Ma'am, we've had break-ins in this neighborhood lately. You matching the description of a potential trespasser. We're going to need to detain you." "No, you're not," she replied calmly. "I just told you who I am. You can confirm it. Check my name. Call Capitol Police. I'll even give you my chief of staff's number. We'll confirm it at the station. Uncuff me and call it in right now. It'll take 2 minutes. Enough. Turn around, hands behind your back. I told you I'm not a threat. I'm a U.S. representative. That's a new one. Usually people say they're cousins with the mayor or someone famous. You might be the first one to try Congress." Then came the touch, too forceful, too quick. She was grabbed, spun, and her hands yanked behind her. Her face pushed down toward the bricks of her own porch. She didn't scream, didn't fight. She just inhaled the earthy smell of mildew and concrete and closed her eyes. The cuffs clicked on. She felt more than pain. She felt humiliation. A raw and ancient ache settled in her bones, the same one she'd felt as a child when a teacher accused her of cheating because her vocabulary was too advanced. The same ache when she'd been the only black law student in a seminar, and the professor had asked her to explain urban criminality. The same ache when, on her first campaign trail, an old white man asked if she was running for community organizer or babysitter. It never left. It waited, quiet and patient, beneath the surface, until moments like this when it reared back to remind her, not even elected power can scrub off the skin you're born in. She was walked to the cruiser under the curious eyes of neighbors peeking through curtains. No one came outside. No one asked if she was okay. The ride to the station was quiet at first. Then came the jokes. "Man, I've seen some lies in my day," said Raiden, glancing at her through the rearview mirror, but pretending to be a congresswoman. "That's bold. She'll be lucky if she doesn't get hit with impersonating a federal official," Holt added. "You should have seen her face, though. Real serious. Like she actually believed it." She stared out the window. The buildings passed like shadows. Her heart didn't beat fast anymore. It pulsed steadily, angrily, coldly. She imagined the emails piling up in her inbox. The voicemail from her mother asking if she'd made it home safely. The headline she would have laughed at if it weren't about her. Congresswoman arrested outside her own home. It sounded absurd, but absurdity was part of the truth in America. Absurdity was systemic. It always found ways to wrap itself around the lives of the innocent. It wore uniforms. It wore badges. It used sarcasm instead of bullets, but it still left bruises. At the station, she was searched, fingerprinted, photographed. They took her phone, her bag, even her shoelaces. She gave them her full name again. Date of birth, title, office address. Still, they logged her as Jane Doe, refused identification. She sat alone in a holding cell for 6 hours. No phone call. No information. Just a concrete bench and the sound of a dripping faucet. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. But she did imagine what would have happened if she hadn't been who she was. If she really had been someone with no connections. No platform. No title. What then? Would they have believed her even less? Or would they have treated her exactly the same? She dozed briefly and woke to the sound of a metal door opening. A young female officer walked in, eyes wide, holding a sheet of paper. You need to come with me," the officer stammered. "Now, why?" Elena asked flatly. "We just confirmed who you are." She was led out, uncuffed, and given back her belongings. Her phone had 47 missed calls. Her staff, her mother, 2 from Capitol Police, 1 from the Speaker's office. She stepped into a hallway where her lawyer was waiting, frantic and red-eyed. "Jesus, Elena," Ellis said. "We just got the call." "What the hell happened?" "What always happens," she replied. But this time, it happened to someone they weren't expecting. They stood there in silence. Then she walked forward, head high, her fingerprints still drying on the ink card in her hand.